Thanks everyone for joining. We're going to give people just a few minutes to log in and then we'll get started. As you're waiting for us to get started, if we could ask if you have not yet completed the pre-survey for tonight, if you could go ahead and scan the QR code that correlates to who you are. If you're a patient or caregiver, please scan the code on the left. If you're a health provider looking to claim CEUs for tonight's session, please scan the one on the right. We'll ask you to do this again at the end with a post-survey. This information truly helps us learn about our programs and improve what we're doing. So we thank you in advance for filling these out. And we'll get started in just a few moments. There's a question in the Q&A about a link for the QR codes. Jennifer, if you could go ahead and drop those links in the chat, that would be great. Just give us a moment and we'll get those links in the chat. Again, if you're just logging in, welcome. We're very excited for our inaugural Culinary Medicine webinar. We still have quite a few people coming in, and so we're going to hang tight and get started in about another minute. In the meantime, if you could please go ahead and complete the pre-surveys. There's one on the left for patients and caregivers, and one on the right for health providers wishing to claim continuing education credits for tonight's seminar. So go ahead and scan those, or there'll be a link in the chat momentarily. All right, those links are now in the chat. So if you were looking for a link and not a QR code, they are in the chat. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone so much for joining tonight. This is our first Innovations in Culinary Medicine webinar, and we are so excited for all of you to join us. This has been a project long in the making, and we are so thrilled to have such an amazing group of speakers here with us tonight to present on improving the nutritional quality of the gluten-free diet. I see there's still lots of people coming in the room. So one more time, I will just say again, if you've not completed the pre-survey, please take a moment to do so. I'm going to switch the slide now, but the link to do the surveys is in the chat. I have to start by saying a huge thank you to Shar, and particularly Megan Donnelly from Shar USA. Megan has been a champion of nutrition education and really trying to find ways to make nutrition education accessible to everybody across the United States and across the world. And so we are extremely grateful to Megan's vision and to her whole team at Shar for helping to make these sessions possible. So tonight is just the first. There'll be many others this year. And Megan, I just hope that you and your whole team know how much we truly appreciate you being a part of this.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. I'm so excited to be here and to listen to what all the speakers have to say. And, we're so happy to support Vanessa and the Celiac Disease Foundation for putting this together and developing such an amazing program that is so accessible across the country.
So culinary medicine, and this has been really interesting for me as we've started promoting this. We've had so many emails come in from people saying they had no idea that culinary medicine was even a thing, and we're so excited to join tonight. And so we thought that we would start by just explaining what culinary medicine is. So culinary medicine is an evidence-based field that brings together the medical, the nutrition, and the culinary knowledge to help patients in maintaining their health, preventing and treating disease. And so we put together this cute little graphic of how we envision culinary medicine working, of bringing together the expert physicians in the field of celiac disease with the expert dietitians and skilled medical chefs. And so throughout all of our culinary medicine forums that will be available, we will always have doctors, dietitians, and chefs who are together presenting information on the medical side of celiac disease and the latest research, nutritional education concepts, and then a chef who will be cooking and sharing wonderful recipes with us. So we have an amazing group for tonight. We have Dr. Ritu Verma, who is the president of the Society for the Study of Celiac Disease, as well as the director of the University of Chicago Celiac Disease Center. We have Jessica Lebovits from the Columbia University Celiac Disease Center, Sharon Weston from Boston Children's Hospital, and Molly Winston, who you should all know from Freedom Bakery, but also On Molly's Plate, and an amazing, in addition to being a dietitian and a fabulous chef, also a professional female football player. So lots of things to learn tonight from our amazing speakers. So without further ado, I'm going to pause here and turn it over to Dr. Verma.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Megan. This is a very exciting project that we're all involved in, and I have a small role here. So I'm going to try and share the screen. And are you able to see this, Vanessa?
Yep, it looks good.
Great, thank you. So what I'm going to do in the next 10 minutes, or at least try in the next 10 minutes, is sort of give a rapid overview of what is celiac disease, the symptoms, the diagnosis, and spend a little bit of time in terms of what goes on in the gut that then affects us from a nutritional standpoint, and perhaps talk a little bit about follow-up in celiac disease. So it's going to be rapid, 10 minutes. That's what Vanessa has assigned to me. So what is celiac disease? As we all may know, it's an autoimmune condition. It does occur in genetically susceptible individuals, so you have to have those specific genes. It is extremely unique because we do know what the trigger is for the condition, and that's gluten. We also have a test, which is an autoantigen, the tissue transglutaminase. And we also know that if you eliminate that gluten, it does help in resolution of the disease. Unfortunately, this is permanent. This is not something that just goes away once you've been on the diet for a few years or so. It is quite prevalent, as you can see, 1 in 100 children. It's common in first-degree relatives, second-degree relatives. It's also been found to be more common in females. And for everyone to remember, this is seen in any ethnic background, so it's not specific to just one patient population. And then the symptoms of celiac disease are extremely varied. I mean, obviously, there are some people who don't have any major symptoms, and sometimes we only think about GI symptoms as part of celiac disease, which is not true. But the GI symptoms that we tend to see are more diarrhea, poor growth, abdominal pain, constipation, and so on. And there are many other extraintestinal manifestations that are very important for all of us to remember. There's a specific rash, as you can see in the picture. It's called dermatitis herpetiformis. Very painful, very itchy rash, can be seen anywhere on the body. Not every rash is celiac disease, but of course, if you have a rash, it should be looked at. Then there are teeth issues, bones, poor growth, short stature, and then there are neurological symptoms with brain fog, anemia, where you may have more fatigue and tiredness, and sometimes none of these symptoms, but you get blood work done and you find elevated liver enzymes and so on. So very important to remember that there are non-GI symptoms as well. So once you have these symptoms or someone thinks that they have celiac disease, what should one do? The workup starts off initially with a blood test, and this is a blood test that looks at specific tissue transglutaminase antibody, as you can see. They have to do a total IgA level and a TTG, and that's a screening laboratory evaluation that's done. Pretty sensitive and specific, though need to remember that there are some people who have IgA deficiency, and in those people, the TTG IgA is not helpful, and there are other specific antibodies that need to be done, and that's a discussion for another time. And who should be tested? Any patients who have symptoms, obviously. Patients who have other associated diseases. We do know that almost 10% of people with type 1 diabetes end up with celiac disease. So not only the symptomatic people, but also other associated diseases are screened for this condition. And then very important to get family screening done, since we talked about this is a genetic condition. running in the family is very important to get the blood test done, and regardless of symptoms. And why is it important? Why do I have to be tested if I don't have any classic symptoms, I don't have belly aches and so on? So one of the most important things here really is that if you have celiac disease, it can give you a malabsorption. So you're not absorbing all the nutrients. You end up with poor growth, bone issues, neurological complications. But more importantly, it gives you at a higher risk for other autoimmune diseases. So very important that the screening test happen. And then just to go back to why is it that we think people with celiac disease have any of these nutritional abnormalities? So let's go back to the basics. This is your intestinal tract. Doesn't really look like this. This is stretched out intestinal tract. So as you can see, I don't know if the pointer works or not, but the esophagus is right on the top. So food goes down the esophagus into your stomach, gets churned up into your small intestine where it gets absorbed. And we know that in celiac disease, predominantly the inflammation is in your small intestine, in the duodenum and the jejunum. So you get all this inflammation happening. It affects the villi, and then the villi are not absorbing the nutrition. But in normal people, in all of us, that what happens in the gut? So in the duodenum, as you can see on the left of the screen, what gets absorbed? You get calcium absorbed, you get magnesium absorbed, there's iron, there's copper, and all of these get affected whenever there's a malabsorption. So if you eat gluten, it causes this damage to the lining, and all of these elements that you see here, all of these nutrients are no longer being absorbed as well. And so if you think about disease process, if your calcium is not being absorbed, you can have bone disease and so on. So very important to remember, if there's damage to your small intestine, all of these nutrients are not getting absorbed in your intestine. So some of the diseases that happen, and some of you may have it, you may have heard about it, with bone disease and celiac disease can be different kind of things. You can either just have joint pains, or you can actually have osteoporosis or osteopenia. And why does this happen? Some of it is because people may have lactose intolerance, so they cut down the calcium, but a lot of that has to do with malabsorption and also some autoimmune factors which affect the bones as well. I'm very interested in neurological disease. So again, neurological disease and celiac disease can present in so many different aspects. You can have headaches, brain fog, anxiety, and so on. There are lots of theories of why people with celiac disease end up with neurological disease, and some of it may be because of the malabsorption. So if you remember that diagram before with the stretched out intestines, if you have malabsorption of these folate, B6, iron, magnesium, and copper, it may be associated with neurological diseases. It has been associated that there's some malabsorption of tryptophan and so on. So it starts making sense, right? So that's a part of intestine that absorbs the iron, that absorbs that vitamin, it gets affected. So there has to be some side effect from there. Obviously, there are many other reasons why people can have neurological diseases, and a lot of research is needed, but just to remember that vitamins can be one of the factors there as well. And I mentioned iron deficiency anemia. It's probably the most common non-GI manifestation in adult studies, and it's seen in children as well. Again, I'm a pediatric gastroenterologist, so I definitely think about the children. And we have children who are not gaining weight, but then there are children who are gaining weight but have short stature, so their height is not going. So very important to remember that even if your weight is going up, but your height is not, you could still have celiac disease. And there's some studies done that almost 10% of the short children and teens may have evidence of celiac disease as well. So what's the treatment? Currently, the only treatment we have is a gluten-free diet. And as almost all of you will know, that there is no wheat, rye, and barley. You can obviously have rice, corn, potato, and so on. And the experts that follow me know more about this than I do, but this is sort of the treatment and the only treatment we have. Very important to remember that do not start a gluten-free diet prior to full evaluation. It's so important that a diagnosis, a correct diagnosis is made, and then you start the gluten-free diet based on discussions with dietitians and your clinical team. So do you think if you go on a gluten-free diet, that's all I need to do? Well, not really, because remember that stretched out intestine, all those vitamins are not being absorbed. So important that besides a gluten-free diet, you're also looking at various vitamin deficiencies, that you're getting multivitamin that has the vitamin Bs in it, folic acid, iron, and so on. And the experts that follow will tell you more about that. But important to remember that just being on a gluten-free diet is not the only answer, that you should have some of these vitamin deficiencies and vitamins to take along with that. Important to look at the calories because, again, you've been malabsorbing, so you're not absorbing. The same thing with protein. You've got to look at a balanced diet besides just taking a gluten-free diet. So you see someone, you get a diagnosis, you get started on a gluten-free diet, and you're like, life is good. Well, no, life is good, but you've got to have follow-up. So please remember the follow-up is important. So why do we need to follow up, right? So I got a diagnosis made, I'm on a gluten-free diet, I'm even taking my vitamins. But very important to follow up because there can be complications of celiac disease. And just looking at the damage that's in the small bowel is not a good indicator for the extent of malnutrition. You can have very minor damage to your duodenal biopsies and still have significant malnutrition. So extremely important that you follow with your clinical team. And the clinical team should involve a dietitian, a physician or nurse practitioner who is an expert in celiac disease, the dietitian to be an expert in celiac disease, and a psychologist would be great to follow with that as well as your team. But that clinical assessment is extremely important at the time of diagnosis and ongoing as well. Monitoring your vitamins should be checked at the time of diagnosis and even while you're on a gluten-free diet. Because again, your vitamin absorption is not going to be right away as soon as you start with a gluten-free diet. Monitoring growth is important and additional symptoms. Sometimes you may have more diarrhea. Could it be because there's some gluten going in your diet? Or could it be that you have a zinc deficiency and that's why you have diarrhea? So monitoring the symptoms are important. Assessing for comorbid conditions. A lot of children and adults who have celiac disease can also end up with thyroid disease. There's a thought that maybe there's a deficiency in iodine, and that might be a reason for some thyroid disease, or it could be autoimmune as well. So again, looking with your dietitian, whether you have enough of those supplements is very important. In women, of course, I don't see women usually who have reproductive issues, but they can be women with reproductive issues because of micronutrient deficiency. So again, follow-up becomes important. So here we're talking the diet is the diet is the diet, and the gluten-free diet is the answer. Unfortunately, the gluten-free diet is your disease treatment, but they're also the gluten-free diet currently, though Shar is working on it. Lots of foods are found to be high in fat, low in fiber, low in a lot of vitamins. The gluten-free products are low in a lot of vitamins and low in a lot of minerals. So very important that you continue to follow while you're on a gluten-free diet, because now you want to make sure that you're not at a risk for obesity, for cardiovascular risk, and so on. A recent study done also showed that a lot of ultra-processed foods that are gluten-free, and if a person is not exercising enough, there are actually higher levels of oxidative stress. And there are some pro-inflammatory cytokines. So it's on the basis of immunology as well. It's not just us saying it's high in fat and so on, but the ultra-processed foods have been found to be associated with some of these particular cytokines. And this is regardless of how long someone has been on a gluten-free diet. So follow up with your dietitians, very important, and looking at the nutrient deficiencies. Part of follow-up is also education. So when children are diagnosed, if someone is diagnosed at 4 years of age and now you are 10 or 12 years, we as a clinical team need to educate you on what is now developmentally appropriate for you. If you are a person of a different ethnic background, and always give an example, I'm Indian, and I do have 2 children with celiac disease, and if they go in and they're seeing a dietitian or a clinical team that does not give them what they need from an Indian cuisine standpoint, I'm not going to come back to you. So again, talking to your dietitian, don't run away from your dietitian. Talk to your dietitian and ask them to give you guidance on ethnically appropriate gluten-free foods that will work for your children and for yourself, and the diet and the supplements. And family-centered care, I'm a total passionate about this, that it has to be education, not just for the patient, their families, and anyone else who's involved in their care, whether it's grandparents, uncles, aunts, school, anything. Looking at these children and adults, Because now we are restricting foods, we're putting them on a gluten-free diet. We need to help them. We need to help improve their quality of life and coping skills. A number of these children gain a lot of weight, and that gets concerning. A number of people develop abnormal eating behaviors, depression and anxiety. So very important to follow up with your team and have them talk to you, help you improve your quality of life. Food insecurity is a big topic, and maybe that'll be another topic for another day. But again, looking at COVID-19 and everything else that is going on, there's a lot of insecurity. So following up, looking to your team to help you is what you want to do with this. So why is compliance important? A lot of reasons. There's a lot of evidence to show that when children with symptomatic celiac disease adhere to a gluten-free diet, it obviously results in resolution of their symptoms. It helps them grow, and growth is happening in that pediatric age group, so very important. It normalizes the blood work. And then studies have also shown that the quality of life in children who are on a gluten-free diet, who were symptomatic, improves significantly. And in adults, there is definitely an improvement in terms of higher increased cancer risk. So compliance, follow-up is extremely important. And these are our references. And at this point, I am going to sign off. Hopefully, I didn't take too much more time than the 10 minutes, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Dr.
Vanessa?
We will hand it over to Sharon Weston.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Verma, and thank you, Vanessa. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So my objectives are to offer practical guidance on building a well-balanced gluten-free diet, including sources of essential nutrients like fiber and vitamins and minerals, and also address potential nutritional deficiencies that individuals with celiac disease may face and how to mitigate them through diet, and then offer some kid-specific tips. So first off, building a well-balanced gluten-free diet requires a lot of planning, right? To ensure that we're getting all of the essential nutrients that our bodies need. And by following the plate model, and in this case, what I'm showing here is the healthy eating plate that was developed by Harvard School of Public Health. And this is modified to show gluten-free grains. But by following this plate model, we can ensure that we're getting a balance of nutrients that are unique to each food group. And remember that foods fall into food groups based on their similarities in the type of food that they are, as well as the nutrients that they provide. So you can notice that many of the foods falling into these food groups are, first off, naturally gluten-free and also unprocessed. So by eating more wholesome foods, less ultra-processed foods, we can provide our bodies with more nutrients. And this may also reduce the risk of cross-contamination. So let's just walk through these food groups. So first off, when we talk about fruits and vegetables, these are going to be obviously high in vitamin C, but also vitamin A and fiber. I like to think of a rainbow of colors as we're walking through our day, trying to add a fruit or a vegetable to a meal or a snack, or include it into a recipe, which we can talk about with, all of our culinary medicine recipes, so that we try to hit that goal of eating fruits and vegetables 5 or more times a day. Each different color is going to be loaded with unique phytochemicals that can help also reduce inflammation and optimize health. We also want to think about adequate protein intake. Protein is, again, as Dr. Verma said, essential for growth, also repair of tissues. Remember that all of our hormones are made of protein. We're constantly doing protein turnover and replacing amino acids with new amino acids, a lot from our dietary protein. So we need to make sure that we're including protein-rich foods, such as lean meats and fish, poultry, eggs, tofu, legumes, nuts, seeds in our meals and our snacks. We also want to think about the carbohydrate part of the plate. And so including gluten-free grains or naturally gluten-free starchy vegetables for the carbohydrate part of the plate will just balance out that protein. And so opting for gluten-free grains like quinoa or brown rice, buckwheat, amaranth, sorghum, trying a different variety of gluten-free grains, even gluten-free oats, can provide us with essential carbohydrates, fiber, vitamins, and minerals. And some also provide us with additional plant-based protein as well. We also want to think about calcium. And so dairy or dairy alternatives can help us just provide that calcium for bone health. And then healthy fats are going to play a crucial role in brain health, also hormone production, and absorption of fat-soluble vitamins. So including sources of healthy fats like avocados, olive oil, nuts, seeds, and even fatty fish is a great way to improve that intake of healthy fats. And then don't forget about hydration, right? So hydrating with water is a great way to aid in digestion without adding that extra sugar that is found in sugar-sweetened beverages. Paired snacks is another really important concept that I really like to get across. And so this is a great way to provide a fuel to our bodies. It acts as a bridge between two meals, and it provides that more gradual rise and fall of blood sugar. And it's also great to eat our snacks mindfully, which means that we're sitting down, slowing down, and really savoring every bite that we're eating. So to build a paired snack, we're really trying to do this combination of a vegetable or a fruit or a legume or a gluten-free whole grain and pair it with a protein or a fat. So for example, having a cup of baby carrots and 2 tablespoons of hummus or 2 tablespoons of ranch dressing. Another example would be like an apple and a tablespoon of peanut butter, or it could be a serving of gluten-free pretzels and some hummus, or even mixing in some nuts with that. But those are easy snacks that are going to provide that long, sustainable source of food fuel and also provide us with great nutrients. Gluten-free foods also can be higher in carbohydrates, sugar, and saturated fat content, and lower in fiber and also micronutrients as compared to gluten-containing counterparts. So studies have shown that both adult and pediatric patients with celiac disease are more at risk to have nutritional deficiencies, not only at diagnosis, but also after diagnosis. And this can include things like calories and protein, fiber, healthy fats, calcium and vitamin D, iron, and then B vitamins like B12, folate, and riboflavin. The best thing to think of is dietary variety, and so that helps us improve our average intake across the board. So let's just walk through these. So first off, with calories and protein, we can really improve our calories and protein intake just by thinking again about balanced meals and paired snacks that balance really boosts nutritional intake, quality, variety, and that protein sources can be added from a variety of meats and poultry and eggs and dairy, as well as plant-based protein sources that would come from things like tofu, nuts, peanut butter, nut butters, and even things like ancient grains like quinoa. Fiber is also very challenging at times to meet on the gluten-free diet. And in general, when we think about fiber goals for pediatrics, we start with the age plus 5 rule, which means you take your age in years and you add 5 to kind of set an initial goal for grams per day, and then work up to that recommended daily intake level, which can vary based on age from 19 up to 38 grams per day. So by gradually working up fiber intake through adding vegetables and fruits and legumes and gluten-free whole grains is a more realistic way to improve fiber intake. And we also want to make sure that we're including adequate hydration as we're increasing our fiber intake. When we think about healthy fats, we want to kind of focus on using more plant-based fats to replace those saturated fats that come from animal fats or highly processed foods. And so those plant-based fats are a great way to improve intake of healthy fats. Think of foods like nuts and seeds, nut butters, avocado, hummus, olives. These are all great sources of plant-based fats that are also naturally gluten-free. For calcium and vitamin D, these are things that go hand in hand to optimize bone health. And so encouraging either fortified dairy or fortified alternative dairy, milks and yogurts as part of meals and snacks is a great way to boost our intake of calcium and also vitamin D. Other sources of vitamin D can come from things like certain mushrooms that are cultivated under a certain type of UVB rate of light, and then oily fish, and then even just exposure to sunshine without a little sunscreen is a great way to just boost our vitamin D intake. or level, I should say. Iron, very important. So we know that iron is one of those high risk micronutrient deficiencies for celiac disease. And so focusing on fortified gluten-free cereals is a great way to just boost that iron intake, as well as foods such as red meats or lentils, soybeans, and tofu. And trying to combine an iron-rich food along with a vitamin C source is also going to improve iron absorption. So for example, if you had lentil soup and you had sliced tomatoes with that, or tomatoes were in the lentil soup, that vitamin C and iron together improves that absorption. For B vitamins, we want to think about vitamin B12, folate, and riboflavin, especially. Vitamin B12 sources are naturally going to come from animal-based foods, so things like meats and eggs, dairy, and fish, but also B12 enriched plant-based foods, so things like soy milk or oat milk that's enriched will have B12 added to it. Good sources for folate will include things like green leafy vegetables, things like spinach, romaine lettuce, asparagus, also things like lentils, beets, broccoli, and then foods that are high in riboflavin are going to include things like milk and yogurt, quinoa, lean meats, poultry, eggs, seafood, beans, peas, lentils, nuts and seeds, and also soy products. So finally, I think on this slide, I want to make sure that I point out that working with a celiac dietitian can also really help determine nutritional adequacy and come up with an individualized approach, especially if you have a picky eater or someone that just doesn't like a variety of foods. Really analyzing what they're eating and where the holes are in their diet is an important thing to focus on, and taking advantage of culinary medicine to try new recipes, which incorporate a variety of nutrient-rich foods in order to help optimize intake and restore nutritional deficiencies that may exist at diagnosis, but also provide adequate intake of nutrients after diagnosis is important. For kids-specific practical tips, first thing is really to make it fun, right? So involving kids in the planning, shopping, and preparation of meals and snacks. Culinary medicine classes can be a super fun way to open up many new doors and try new foods, try new recipes, even from a young age. And young children can help gather ingredients. They can help wash or dry fruits and vegetables. They can help mix things. And as kids get older, they can carry on more independent cooking skills that really help to foster confidence in preparing healthy recipes on their own. Educating is also important, right? So teaching kids about gluten-free foods and how they relate to improving health, but also making foods tasty can really improve dietary adherence to the gluten-free diet. And culinary medicine's ability to educate about using food as medicine can really provide a source of empowerment to improve health. Encouraging variety is another important point. So eating a variety of foods, eating a rainbow of colors of fruits and vegetables, choosing different gluten-free grains and proteins and healthy fats, and playing around with different cooking methods, different spices, different shapes, different textures to determine different individual preferences. Thinking outside the wrapper is another important practical tip. So homemade meals and homemade snacks made from scratch can really outweigh ultra-processed foods in so many ways. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be very simple combinations using the balanced plate model, using the paired snack concept, can just produce some very easy, healthy options. And then we want to think about social situations. So coming up with strategies to help kids navigate situations in school, in different sporting events or family or friend gatherings. And by planning ahead and making a game plan in advance for meals and snacks can just help improve the nutritional quality of the foods that are eaten, and also minimize the risk of getting glutened. And finally, seeking support. So taking advantage of support groups to share and learn from others and just feel like you're not alone. And then finally, I just wanted to talk a little about just school, right? So tips for improving nutritional intake in school. First off is to try to integrate nutrition education into the school curriculum. It doesn't have to be just in health class. Nutrition can really be embedded in all classes. It can be like a simple math problem, right? working with the schools to provide healthy gluten-free foods in the cafeteria and choose vendors that provide healthy gluten-free varieties that are not super high in sugar or ultra processed. Also, just focusing on some fun activities in schools. So school gardens are a great way to reinforce that whole concept of nurturing. Nurturing a plant is just like us nurturing our bodies to improve growth and health and wellness. And then extending nutrition information from school to home is just another way that we're really spreading the word about health and eating naturally gluten-free foods into and spreading that into the community at large, and offering workshops, community engagement, even like visits to local farms can really just, again, focus on using and taking advantage of those naturally gluten-free foods to just give more opportunities to eating healthfully. All right. I'm going to pass it on to Jessica.
Thank you.
And Jessica, just right before you get started, for those of you who are asking about claiming the CE credits, towards the end of the webinar, we'll be putting the post surveys in the chat for everyone to fill out, and there will be the one for the CE credits as well as for patients. So those are coming up.
Thanks, Vanessa. All right. So now that we know what we need to add to our gluten-free diet to make it nutritionally complete, I'm going to talk more about practical tips for how we can make that happen. So first off, let's recognize that there are several barriers to consuming a nutritionally adequate diet. There's probably a reason we aren't all already just doing this, right? Why do dietitians even exist? Well, there may be taste preferences related to gluten-free foods or fresh foods. Not everyone loves their gluten-free options. We also know that the food you eat is often influenced by those around you. Oftentimes, your food choices are not solely up to you, but they may be impacted by the attitudes and preferences of your friends and family. Additionally, there may be a lack of knowledge about how to even prepare gluten-free foods, or you may not feel that you have the skills to cook. Next, you may not feel comfortable trying new foods or varying your diet. Other barriers may involve your meal patterns or settings. Are you eating most meals at home, at a family or friend's home, or dining out or taking in food regularly? Food insecurity and availability of gluten-free foods is another issue that we can't overlook. And lastly, kitchen availability, including limited space or appliances, or even a shared kitchen, can be another barrier. I'm in New York City, and I know not everyone has a full kitchen in their apartment. Others have roommates, so that adds another variable to the mix. But with the help of your dietitian, you can work together on strategies to reframe these barriers and make consuming a healthy diet more manageable. So it all starts with meal planning. Setting aside time to meal plan will allow you to map out your week ahead, instead of worrying about what to eat each day in the middle of your busy week. Creating a meal plan will allow you to ensure you're consuming nutritious meals, saving time, and spending less money. You'll also have more opportunity to experiment with different foods when cooking at home. Start by creating a menu of the meals you plan to make for the week. Account for meals that you will be eating outside of the home, and don't forget to buy food for all of your meals. That includes breakfast, lunch, and snacks too. You want to fuel yourself throughout the day to ensure you're energized and not inducing more symptoms for yourself. For example, if you skip lunch, you may be extra hungry for dinner and inclined to eat more and faster, which may result in bloating and discomfort. When putting together our menu, we want to think of variety to ensure you're getting all of the nutrients you need. As Sharon mentioned, you can aim to think of eating the rainbow. This will help you to get a range of different colors in your diet because each color and each type of food will contain its own unique set of nutrients. Consuming a varied diet also helps prevent flavor fatigue, making the diet more enjoyable. At this point, you can search for various gluten-free recipes. Here's a list of some places to get inspiration from. You can save your recipes so that each week you can look back through your list to help make the decision process easier. To increase variety, create a goal to try out new recipes either weekly, monthly, or as often as you can. Recipes don't have to be complicated or challenging. Simply cooking a new vegetable or grain is a great first step to varying the diet. Once you've completed a recipe, you'll likely feel more comfortable with these new foods and cooking skills and be more willing to try them again. This will add more options to your repertoire and your meal rotation. In addition, you'll have more ingredients on hand that will help you to create other new recipes. It's important to remember that you can't get any worse at cooking. You can only get better with more practice. Even if you're starting from square one, any mistakes you make will help you to learn along the way. I personally was definitely not a skilled cook to start. I think back on when I first made boxed mac and cheese on my own and accidentally made it into cheese soup. Then as a dietitian, I was required to take a cooking class in college. And almost every class, I pretty much failed to produce an edible version of the recipe we were supposed to present that day. After many years, I wouldn't say I'm close to a chef, but I do absolutely love cooking. I cook various gluten-free recipes all the time and share them on my Instagram, GFreeRD. I hope to inspire others to do the same. There are endless resources for recipes at every skill level, whether you look online at blogs, recipe websites, or social media, or you prefer hard copies of cookbooks or magazines. I honestly don't usually use specifically gluten-free recipes since it really is easy to switch up any recipe to make it gluten-free. Baking is a bit more tricky though, but most of the flour brands I listed have recipes on their websites using their flours. As a dietitian, people may think that I just inherently love healthy foods. While I do love vegetables, I absolutely refuse to eat them without flavor. For example, growing up, my mother often made us plain steamed broccoli, which would only inspire a few bites out of me. Once I started cooking on my own, I started exploring broccoli with flavors that I enjoyed. Broccoli with a walnut raisin salsa, with a peanut butter dressing, simply with garlic and red pepper flakes, a cacio e pepe version or Parmesan and black pepper, or as a slaw with almonds, red onion, and a lemony mayo dressing. I can't get enough of the broccoli in these dishes. Figuring out what flavors you enjoy can help you to make healthy foods more appetizing and get you feeling happier to include more of these foods in your diet. It's important not to rule out a food just because you didn't enjoy it one way, but to explore other options that may work better for you. I usually would say though, that although I loved cooked broccoli, raw broccoli was not for me, but I recently discovered that raw broccoli slaw I mentioned, and it may be my favorite broccoli dish yet. Once you have your recipes picked out, write down all of the ingredients you need for each recipe. This will become the base of your grocery shopping list. Compile all these ingredients together along with your grocery needs into one neat list. If you notice you need the same ingredient for multiple dishes, see how you can consolidate them. For example, if 2 dishes call for part of an onion, you may only need to buy 1 onion and divide it up. You may want to make your list according to the layout of your grocery store so that you can move smoothly through the aisles. I actually love using the Notes app on my iPhone. It allows you to make a bulleted list. So as I move through the store, I can check off the items I already added to my cart, and I'll then move those to the bottom of the list, only leaving the items I have left at the top until everything is checked off. Here's one example of a meal plan and its shopping list. Sometimes you don't want to eat the same thing 2 days in a row, or you'll find a recipe didn't use the entire container of one ingredient. You can repurpose those ingredients or your leftovers into new meals. Have leftover roast chicken from Sunday night dinner? Use the leftover chicken for a sandwich on Monday. Have leftovers from taco night on Monday? Use it to make a taco salad for lunch on Tuesday. Have extra lentil pasta from Tuesday's dinner? Use the pasta for mac and cheese for lunch on Thursday. You get the idea. Okay, we have our list. Now we need to do the grocery shopping. Make sure to shop in advance when you have more free time, such as on weekends and days off. I'll often have my patients pick a day of the week and time that they want to loosely designate for making this list and for grocery shopping. I may suggest even setting a phone reminder to make sure they don't get too busy and forget. When people are really pressed for time, there are other options available. Some grocery stores or services offer delivery or pickup, so someone else is doing the shopping for you. Come prepared with your list and your shopping bags. Avoid shopping on an empty stomach, as we know that when we're hungry, our eyes wander, and we may want to buy a lot more than we originally planned for. We made this list for a reason, so we really want to stick to it. Aim to shop the perimeter of the store, as that's usually where all the fresh whole foods will be held. But of course, you'll be making purchases throughout the entire store. You're all used to reading ingredient lists for gluten, but you can also review nutrition labels for other helpful information. The nutrition label will show you how many calories, along with how much protein, sodium, fat, fiber, and specific nutrients are in a product. You can also see how much sugar is in an item. Below it, you will see added sugar, which refers to how much sugar was added to the product that wasn't naturally occurring within the food. But be careful. You want to make sure you're looking at what serving size a label is referring to. Sometimes the amounts will represent the whole package, but most of the time, the serving size will only be a portion of the package. And so you'll need to figure out how much you're actually eating and how does that compare to the serving size on the label. You may need to do some calculations to get a more accurate estimate of how many calories and how much protein, sodium, fat, fiber, and sugar you're taking in. When you look at the ingredient label, you can see what ingredients are included. Ingredients are listed on products in descending order by weight, so that the first ingredient is always present in the largest amount. So for example, if you're buying a chicken dinner, you would really hope that the chicken would be the first ingredient and not sugar. You can also look at the ingredients to see if they include whole grains over refined grains. The fiber content will be a good clue for this as well. Don't be afraid of canned fruits or frozen fruits or vegetables. These can be just as nutritious as their fresh counterparts and may help you to have these foods on hand without them going bad. Once we have all of our ingredients, you may decide that meal prepping is helpful to make your week easier. Consider preparing certain foods in bulk, like a large tray of roasted vegetables or quinoa to last for several days. Or simply chop up certain vegetables or fruits ahead of time. This could be helpful for healthy snacks that are all ready to go, or getting a head start on certain meals you'll be cooking later in the week. Cooking in bulk will help to reduce preparation time right before the actual meal when you may be busier after a long day. Okay, so now let's talk about when you're dining out. I highly recommend researching restaurants that have options that you'll be happy with. There's lots of resources out there like the Find Me Gluten-Free and Atlee apps. Consider checking out the menu ahead of time so you can be somewhat prepared with what you want to order. Sharon taught us about the balanced plate model, and that still applies when dining out. When you're choosing what to order, think about what will be your protein, your starch, and your non-starchy veggie. You may want to order a side if a veggie is not included in your dish. You can also use dining out as a great way to try new foods that you wouldn't necessarily cook yourself. Just like when you go to the grocery store, you don't want to show up to a dinner out too hungry. This may lead you to choose less nutritious options, eat too much, or eat too quickly. It's okay to have a snack before dinner so that you're not starving by the time your food comes. You can think about a hunger scale, 1 being so hungry you could eat a horse, and 10 being so stuffed you never want to eat again. We want to try to avoid those extremes because that's where the problems will happen. Try to enter each meal at a 4 where you're comfortably hungry and ready to eat, but not ravenous that you'll eat too quickly. And end a meal at a 6 when you're comfortably full and satisfied, but not overly stuffed. On that note, make sure to fuel yourself throughout the day. You don't want to just save up for this meal, as this often backfires and can result in higher calorie intake and potentially more symptoms like reflux, bloating, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. Listen to your hunger cues. Restaurant portions are often large, so if you realize that you're becoming full or feeling like you're at a 6, and if you keep going, you may reach a 7, 8, or 9, consider bringing some home for leftovers. This will save you time and money and allow you to enjoy the food another time. Lastly, and most importantly, enjoy yourself. We know that eating out with celiac disease can be stressful in itself. Savor the good food and enjoy your time with others. For all my patients, I encourage them to increase variety with a tangible goal. That may be one new food or one new recipe per week or per month, depending on what they feel is manageable for them. I'd like you to try out these goals I've listed here. The first is to prepare one new gluten-free recipe. It can be as simple or as complicated as you'd like. And the second is to add one new naturally gluten-free food to your diet. I'm confident that you can all reach these goals, and I hope you discover new foods and exciting recipes that make the gluten-free diet more enjoyable for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. That was fantastic. All right, we are going to now bring in Molly in the kitchen for our cooking demo.
Hi everyone, this is Molly Winston, MSRD, also known as Chef Malls, or On Molly's Plate is my actually done in the microwave first. Potatoes take a lot longer to cook than any of our other ingredients that I'm going to have here. So the potatoes are actually microwaved for about 5 minutes. I'm going to get these down on our sheet tray. Put those down. There's baby potatoes cut in half. Next, I've got my veggies. I've got all sorts of bell peppers, yellow, orange, red, and I also have some jalapenos. If you don't like spicy, you can use green bell pepper or leave them out. And also some sliced garlic and some red onion. So I'm going to put that all in on our sheet tray. I also have some cut pre-cooked chicken sausage. This is really delicious. You can find all sorts of gluten-free brands, and it's really good for you, super high in protein. It just goes right on. This is one sheet tray. I do this lined in parchment paper to keep things from sticking. And I'm just going to toss everything up with my nice clean hands. Hands are wonderful tools in the kitchen. I love color in my food. So I love seeing the rainbow of all these colors here. And the more colors you eat, the more nutrients you're getting in your food. There's all sorts of different nutrients that create different colors in food. So you're looking for that in anything you're making. The more colors, the better. Plus, it looks really pretty. So this is my sheet tray. You can see that it's nice and full. If you have a bigger sheet tray, even better, but you don't want it like overflowing. Everything here is pretty flattened, which is great. For seasoning, I'm going super simple here. I'm going to start with a drizzle of olive oil all over everything. Everything nice and coated. Olive oil is full of healthy fats, super good for you. For my seasoning here, I've got garlic powder, Italian seasoning, and some red pepper flakes. If you don't like spicy, you can just go a little chili powder here and you'll still get lots of great flavor. All of this is going on here. I have 1 teaspoon of each. This is all getting sprinkled. I'm going to mix this all up here. That's all going on. What I have here is a mix of 2 parts salt to 1 part pepper. I'm going to use about half of this. It's going to be about a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of this mixture. When it comes out of the oven, you can always taste test for seasoning, but always add less than you think you need. You can always add more. You can't take it out. So again, using my hands here, I'm going to mix this all up till everything is coated in our seasoning here. And also this chicken sausage is already cooked, so you don't need to worry you're not touching raw meat here at all. And it's super easy too because you have very limited dishes. So once everything is evenly coated there, it looks beautiful. And that is your sheet tray. This whole thing is going to go into a 375-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes, depending on the size of your potatoes and how hot your oven actually runs. And now, while that's cooking, we're going to make a quick Dijon sauce to serve this with. I love interactive food. So I love serving some really simple dishes with a sauce or a dressing or something to just sort of amp up the flavor a little bit. So I have a 1-to-1 ratio here of mayo to mustard. It's about 1.5 tablespoons of each. You don't need very much here. Trying to add some olive oil to emulsify. I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of red wine vinegar here. This is going to make such a delicious, bright flavor to your sauce. To balance that, I'm going to add about a tablespoon of honey right in here. Just squeeze it right in there. This is also going to help thicken it just a little bit. I once again have my 2 part salt to 1 part pepper mixture. I'm going to add about half a teaspoon of this, and then I'll taste for seasoning at the end. And to emulsify this all, we're going to use a little more of our good old olive oil, which is so good for you. And I'm just gonna whisk this all together, and you'll see that everything will start to emulsify. Mustard is a natural emulsifier, so it's gonna help everything sort of stay together. And we're not looking for something thick here. We're making this nice little sauce. And so we're adding all sorts of flavor into here. We've got this all whisked to feel a little bit bright, a little bit sweet, a little bit peppery. And I just always taste for salt and pepper right here. It's perfect. It doesn't need any more. This can sit in the fridge until you're ready to have your sausage, peppers, and potato sheet tray. This will thicken up a little bit as it's in the fridge as well. If you wanted a bit of a thick or creamier sauce, you could add in a dollop of Greek yogurt. Really, really good for you. And that'll thicken it and make it a little bit creamier as well. As always, I check all my ingredients. Mustards in particular can be made sometimes with beer or wheat additives. So make sure you're checking those ingredients every time. Okay, so we have our finished sheet tray. We've got our chicken sausage, our potatoes. Remember, we par cooked those in the microwave so they would cook in time. And we have all our vegetables, bell peppers, jalapeno peppers, onions, garlic, and we're gonna plate this. So I love to serve this in a bowl. I love anything in a bowl. I feel like it's just really a great way to mix everything all together. This serves 4 comfortably, depending on, the size of the people you're feeding. So you make sure you get some of everything, vegetables, chicken, sausage, potatoes. So there we go, some of all the good stuff. And then I just put our sauce here in a squeeze bottle. So I'm just gonna give this a little drizzle right across the top. And then just to finish it off, I have some freshly chopped parsley, add some freshness and some greenery. And that is it. That is your finished sheet tray, chicken sausage, peppers, and potatoes dish. So good. Gluten-free, dairy-free. This is also nut-free. So it's perfect for so many dietary restrictions, and it is absolutely delicious. You have some sweetness from the peppers and some zing from your mustard sauce, freshness from the parsley. The bell peppers also add this great sweetness, a little bit of spice going on, great textures, and it's super balanced, healthy dish. So I hope you try it. Hey guys, we're back with Chef Malls from On Molly's Plate, and we are going to make a spring-inspired Cobb salad today. We're making a fully gluten-free and dairy-free recipe here with tons of nutrients, tons of vegetables, and of course, tons of flavor. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to shred our lettuce. Now, it's obviously pretty easy to cut lettuce. This is a head of romaine, and I love all the crunchiness and all the bright greenery in it. But here's the thing, you actually want to cut down the seam of each side of the head of romaine. This is going to allow you to shred the lettuce and make really nice even pieces. So I'm going to take the tip of my knife and go all the way down through that seam, and I'm going to do that on all sides here. And then when I cut through my lettuce, I'm going to have a really, really nice shred to it, and the pieces will be really beautifully chopped. So I'm going to take my knife now and go all the way down through, and I will get these beautiful shreds of lettuce that are so crunchy and they're even, and they're a lot easier to eat and disperse in a salad than if you just cut immediately without cutting down through the seam. So this is going to be my base for my salad. I'm going to put all of this right in here, and then we are going to make our dressing, and then we will assemble everything. So because we are inspired by springtime, we're going to make a super bright, vibrant green goddess dressing. Green goddess has a lot of different ways that you can make it. We're going to make an herb-based vinaigrette essentially, and then we're going to emulsify it using olive oil. So, and also the garlic. Garlic is actually also a natural emulsifier, which will help it blend together. So in my blender here, I have cilantro and parsley. I have most of the stems of these herbs. The stems are really tasty and provide a ton of flavor and some great nutrients, but they're often cast aside because they're not as nice for garnishing and they aren't as appeasing to the eye. So it's a great way to make sure you're using up all of your produce. So I've got those in here. I also have some green onions, the whites and the green parts. Once again, I want to make sure I'm utilizing everything. I've got some garlic cloves, and I also have a jalapeno in here. I left everything in it because I love spice, but if you don't want spice, you can either take the seeds out or you can leave the jalapeno out altogether. That is totally fine. So I am going to add in a splash of vinegar. You can also use lemon or lime juice here. This is about half a cup. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the olive oil, but I'm going to stream this in as I'm blending on low speed to help emulsify it. Of course, we're going for that beautiful, vibrant green color as well, because it is a green goddess after all. As everything starts to blend, you can start to bring your speed up slowly. So again, you want everything to emulsify here. And you'll see that those herbs just get broken down and they start making more distracting as the olive oil streams in. Now at this point, you have a great texture of your dressing. It's a little bit creamy, it's super bright, but we're gonna add some salt and pepper too. This is 2 parts salt to 1 part pepper. This is really to taste here. You can always add more, you can't really take it out. So I'm gonna add a good pinch of my salt and pepper mixture here, and I'm gonna stream in about another 1/4 cup of olive oil to help finish the dressing. You can see that it's becoming really creamy, and that's because the emulsification process is happening as you're streaming in the olive oil. I'm gonna give it 1 more blitz to make sure everything's really well mixed. This one's gonna be at a bit of a higher speed. And there is your finished green goddess. I'm going to put this into a mason jar, and I'm going to give it a little bit of a taste test. You always want to taste test things like dressings and sauces because you want to make sure that they're properly seasoned. So there is our gorgeous dressing. This will also keep in the fridge, which is a great thing to have on hand for veggies, salads, etc. I'm going to take a little taste just to check it for seasoning. It's perfect, it's vibrant, it's bright, it's super green, and it's going to really add so much flavor to our salad. So now it's time to assemble our salad, going with this theme of spring and all sorts of great flavors. We're going to vary a little bit from a classic Cobb. So we're going to add in a few things. We're going to add in some roasted asparagus, some beautiful green peas, and we're going to add in some julienne radish as well. It's going to add great crunch and texture. So we have our shredded lettuce here as our base. I'm gonna go with some tricolor tomatoes. I always make sure to cut baby tomatoes in half. I don't love them whole. I don't love the look of them in a salad, and I also think they're much easier to eat when they're cut in half. So those go in. We have just some diced cucumber. This is an English cucumber. Those are the ones with the ridges. They're a little bit crunchier and a little bit less water content than traditional cucumber, which means you can really use the whole thing in a salad, and it adds great texture and crunch to anything you're making. That's going in. Next, I have some hard-boiled egg, very traditional in any Cobb salad, and also it's really good for you. So we have lots of protein, we have some good fats coming in here. I just quartered these, but if you prefer these to be chopped, you can do that as well. These are just hard-boiled, there's no softness to the yolk or anything like that, just a classic hard-boiled egg. So we're gonna put those right next to our tomatoes here. And this is one of the reasons too, I didn't put too much lettuce in the salad because you have so much other stuff going on. I hate when salads don't have a ton going on. They get sort of boring or outdone by the lettuce. There's so much going on in here when it comes to textural contrast, color, and variation of flavors. So right in the middle, I'm going to do our main protein, which is our shrimp. I just did this with some garlic and parsley. I roasted it in the oven for about 10 to 12 minutes at 375 degrees. Olive oil, garlic, parsley, salt, and pepper. Super, super easy. These are going to go right in the middle here because they're sort of like the star of the show. They're your main protein. Next, I have a little bit of bacon. It's traditional in a Cobb. I rendered it down. It's just a little bit, and just a little bit goes a long way here. I'm going to scooch this right in between my tomatoes and cucumber. Next, I've got everything on this beautiful platter. So I've got my green peas. I try to alter colors as I'm going. So the cucumber is green, so maybe I don't want to do green right next to the cucumber. So I'm going to do my green peas next to my egg. And then the radish can go in between the peas and the asparagus. Next, I'm going to go in with my roasted asparagus. This was just roasted in the oven at the same time as the shrimp. Olive oil, a little bit of lemon juice, salt and pepper. Let's get that in here. And I just cut these once they came out of the oven. I included the tops and the bottoms. If you only prefer the tops, that's fine. You do not have to use the bottoms. It is not an absolute necessity. Next, I have some pickled onions. These are super easy to make, add so much flavor, and the most beautiful color. All I did was take 1 large red onion, I cut it up pretty thinly, filled a mason jar, and then I did a 1-to-1 ratio of vinegar and water, plus salt, pepper, garlic powder, and you put them in the microwave for about 2 minutes and let them cool, and you have the most beautiful, vibrant pickled onions. So they can go on any salad. They're a great topper for eggs. They're a great topper for anything you have, really any savory meal. They go so well. The last thing I have is some avocado. Again, very traditional in a Cobb salad. I'm going to put that right here. This is just sliced up really nicely. I'm just going to take that out here, put it right here on my salad. The last thing to do when you're ready to eat is to dress your salad. I'm just going to drizzle this right across the top, and then you could toss it. You could also serve this dressing on the side and let people take their salad what they want and let them dress it themselves. I'm just going to take this beautiful green goddess, and I'm just going to drizzle right across, and that is your finished spring-inspired green goddess Cobb. Hope try it.
Thank you so much, Molly. That was so awesome. So
Hi everyone, this is Molly.
we need to switch slides.
Hi everyone.
So now I'm going to ask all of the panelists to please come back to the screen. We are going to go ahead and answer some questions. I know we're running right at time now, but we do want to make sure we get to some of the questions from today. Before we get there, I just want to mention that we have the 2 post surveys up on the screen now for health providers who are wishing to claim continuing education credits for today's seminar. Please go ahead and scan that QR code on the right-hand side. That is how we will be able to submit your credits and get your transcript posted. If you're a patient or a caregiver, if you could please complete the survey on the right side of the screen, that would be wonderful for us to get your feedback on today's seminar. I'm also going to put both of these links in the chat for those of you who are using your digital device and cannot scan a code right now. So these were all absolutely amazing presentations, and we have so many questions that have come in. We have over 100 that have been live, plus over 200 that were pre-submitted. So I want to start with a question that was asked many, many times about ways to make the gluten-free diet more affordable, but also increasing nutritional value. There were a number of questions regarding food insecurity, not being able to get free meals at school. And so how do you all work with patient families that need access to food that's less expensive?
I can start. At Boston Children's, we actually are lucky enough to have a food pantry that's associated with the hospital. And so patients are screened with the hunger vital signs and screening tool. And then if they test positive for food insecurity, then they're really referred to our social work team, and they get access to the food pantry, which has gluten-free foods that they can get in their packages every week. And that's just one way that we provide food. And then we also have cooking classes, culinary medicine cooking classes that are offered every month by Zoom that are free and go over free recipes. And these are all really affordable and easy to make and simple. And so that's just some options that we try to encourage.
Great. So there was a question. I saw another presentation from a medical provider that said that 0 gluten in food is impossible. Can any of our dietitians elaborate on this and help us understand what this means?
That could have been us. So, we don't tell patients that the goal is a 0 gluten diet. Otherwise, you'd probably be in a bubble and never leaving your home. Even gluten-free products don't have 0 gluten in them. They are something that is labeled gluten-free is tested to be below 20 parts per million, or a concentration of gluten that's deemed acceptable for somebody with celiac disease. So most of the time, that's not going to be 0. So maybe water has 0 gluten in it, but even like a gluten-free bread, the Char products, which are super safe for celiac patients, oftentimes they're probably not going to have 0. This really comes into play in terms of just the natural environment, harvesting, manufacturing practices, but these tiny amounts should be fine for most patients. And the studies that have been done have shown that this amount really should be okay and still induce healing and still allow you to be healthy on a gluten-free diet with celiac disease.
Thank you. Dr. Verma, does one accidental gluten exposure lead to nutrient deficiencies?
No, that's the short answer. It does not.
Great. So there are probably 24 questions on oats, and I don't want to give it all away tonight because actually our next culinary medicine webinar is titled "To Eat or Not to Eat," talking about oats. But since there are so many questions coming in, I don't want all these people to feel ignored. So can our dietitians just briefly touch on your approach to counseling patients with celiac disease on oats?
And I can start, and then Jessica, you can add. So oats are tricky, right? Because oats should be gluten-free, but because of the way that they're cultivated, they're contaminated unless they're gluten-free oats. And then even when we look at gluten-free oats, there's 2 ways that manufacturers can produce gluten-free oats. One is the purity protocol, and one is the mechanical optical sorting method. And both should produce a final product that's less than 20 parts per million. The products are tested, like Jessica said, to be less than 20 parts per million. But even with that said, there's still a part of oats that can still be challenging to tolerate, just because there's another protein in oats called avenin. And for some patients that have celiac disease, that avenin protein can be a troublemaker. And so if you are eating gluten-free oats and you don't feel good and your TTG levels are not coming down, then talk to your dietitian and your GI provider and individually come up with a plan that may remove gluten-free oats for a period of time, and then revisit that.
Yeah, I'll give a very short answer on that. Basically, the rule of thumb for us is that all oats that you're going to eat with celiac disease should be labeled gluten-free, or any oat product. But at the end of the day, it's really individualized, and you should work with your dietitians and your doctors to determine whether oats are okay for you, because it's going to be based off of your symptoms, your antibodies, your healing, your preferences, so many other factors that Megan and I have actually worked out an algorithm for dietitians and practitioners to use to kind of figure out when it is right. And the frequency, how often are you actually eating them? Are you eating them once a year? We're probably not going to care nearly as much if you're eating them every day. So, once a year is not as much of an issue as eating every day.
But
Dr.
I'd
Verma,
just like to add, I would just like to add on those oats controversy that one should not be afraid. I think it's not a no, it's something that has to be discussed, but it's got good nutritional value. So I think that discussion should be there with your team, and it's not a food product that you should say no to right away.
Dr. Verma, how long is too long for a child's antibody levels to go down after being diagnosed with celiac disease, and when should a parent worry?
So I think it depends on how high the first antibody is. So, every time you get the blood work done, it should be lower than the previous one. So that's rule of thumb. If it's getting lower than the previous time, your antibodies, you're in a good place. And for some people, it can take 2 years, some 2.5, 3 years to totally normalize. And that's okay. So long as everything else is fine, the numbers continue to go down each time, and the symptoms and growth and everything else is fine. Focusing on the numbers is good, but maybe not overly hypervigilant about those numbers. So each time it goes down, you're in a good place.
Great. Why do some people with celiac disease still experience symptoms even though they are on a strict gluten-free diet?
I'll say from a physician standpoint, there are so many other reasons why people can have symptoms. So looking at the gluten-free diet, there were a lot of questions going on about beans and things like that. Even in people who don't have celiac disease, if you eat a lot of beans at one time, there's a lot of products in there that generate a lot of gas. So you can have symptoms because of a particular fiber is good, but you have too much fiber at one time, it's going to generate gas and symptoms. So look at the food products you're eating. Then there are things like intolerances. There's lactose intolerance and so on. You could be constipated, not uncommon if you're not getting the right balanced diet that you all learned today from culinary medicine. But if you're not doing that, you don't have enough fiber. Gastroparesis, there's a lot of reasons that you can. So again, it becomes important to have that discussion with your team and not immediately think it has to be gluten or a food that I should take out of my diet.
So there are a few questions about other grains, specifically quinoa, and then some other questions about lentils that are labeled gluten-free, but being told by providers not to eat them because of cross-contact. Is this true? How do they know what to believe when it comes to things like quinoa and lentils?
I think if it says gluten-free, it's fine. Go ahead and have it. But Sharon and Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that especially with grains, trying to focus on certified gluten-free might be a better way to move towards just grains. just because there's a higher ramped up level of testing. And you can find gluten-free lentils and gluten-free, certified gluten-free products like that now. So so that might be, you know, a smarter way to go if you feel, especially like you're not feeling good when you're eating things that don't say certified gluten-free or gluten-free for legumes.
Yeah, I would say that with grains, generally, I recommend grains and grain-based products to just have a gluten-free label so you know that they're being tested. Quinoa and rice are not usually grown on the same fields with wheat, so it may be, you know, that those, like a pure version of that could potentially be okay. Lentils, oftentimes I don't see it with a gluten-free label, but, you know, if there aren't any other gluten ingredients and you're rinsing it and you're checking for any, you know, extraneous you know, particles, you probably should be okay as well.
And I'm very much going to generalize this last question because there were about 40 very specific questions on supplements. And so I'm going to generalize this to, should all celiac patients be taking supplements, and how do they know what the right ones are?
So my group recently just published guidelines for micronutrients for celiac disease. And we had come to a consensus that not all patients with celiac disease have to take a multivitamin or necessarily nutrient supplementation. I think it really depends on the case. How low are the levels? If you just got diagnosed, your levels are only slightly low, and then you're going to go on a gluten-free diet, you're going to heal, and you're meeting with dietitians, you're getting all the nutrients out of your diet, you may not need it. But if your levels are quite low, we really need to boost that up. We may recommend a multivitamin or specific nutrient supplementation, again, depending on how many are low and what those levels are.
Great,
I
thank
think
you.
it's important to have things checked out rather than just taking all the supplements that are out there.
And I think it really goes back to Dr. Verma's, you know, conclusion is follow-up is really important. Follow up with your physician, follow up with your dietitian, and make sure that you're asking these questions because it does vary by individual. So listen to Dr. Verma and make those follow-up appointments if you haven't already for this year. So we are already a little bit over time, and we thank you all for sticking with us. One last reminder to please complete the post surveys for health providers claiming CEUs. You must complete the survey in order for us to process your transcript. And as I mentioned, our next Culinary Medicine webinar is on oats, to eat or not to eat. Oats and the gluten-free diet will be on Wednesday, April 24th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that is accredited for CEUs for physicians and dietitians. And to all of the nurses, psychologists, and social workers watching, we have seen your comments and your pleas for CE credits for you, and we will work on that for future seminars, we promise. So thank you again to all of our speakers, Dr. Verma, Jessica, Sharon, and Megan, and of course, our amazing chef, Molly, and a huge thank you again to Shar for making this series possible. Thank you all for joining, and we'll hopefully see you again in April. Good night, everyone.